Alright guys, back with another video. So today I am going to be working on the front suspension. You would have just seen that I've taken the front wheels off and I've got the front of the car up on blocks. Now this side is complete, this side hasn't been started, so I need to make a jig that will locate the mounting positions, pivot points, etc. of what's on this side. The tricky part about it is that it's not a straight up jig, it needs to be a mirror image, so there's like a 180-degree flip. So I haven't really done that before, but I've got some ideas on how to make that work, so I will show you what I'm doing as I go along. The shock is removed, so what I really need to do is locate these mounting positions in space and then transfer them over to this side. So I'm going to show you how I'm doing that. So this is the bolt for the bell crank, and I've got some tube which is the same size as that bolt on the internal diameter, and then we've got the shock bolt, and again I've got a bit of tube, so that's going to locate those mounting positions. So I've been staring at this thing for quite a while now, and I couldn't really figure out a way to make a jig that would be a mirror image on the other side. I did have ideas to use some square, so that actually fits perfectly into that slot. And I thought if I was able to cut it and then flip it and keep it all square, that would work, but it doesn't actually work that way, so I'm still scratching my head about how to locate these positions exactly. So after I got sick of looking at it for a while, I decided to cut this opening out, so I've been working on that. And now I'm just looking at these are the load spreading plates, so you'll see I've got these welded. So this just distributes the force. This is only 2 mil and this is 3 mil, so that just distributes the force of the shock through here, and same another one which will sit here. So I'm probably going to get those welded on first and then go back to thinking about how to locate these mounting points. I just wheeled the car over to my welder, my TIG welder here. Very convenient with the trolley, and you can see I've been sitting nice and comfortable in a chair and doing the welding. It's been really good to have this. So those two load spreading plates are now welded to the chassis. I get a lot of questions about the strut towers. So I have to keep the strut towers under the rules. So the World Time Attack Pro-Am rules state that you have to keep the front strut towers. The only modification you can do to them is you can clearance them for tyre, which I've done here for tyre clearance, and you're also allowed to cut them for mounting suspension, which is also what I'm doing here. So if anyone was wondering why I've still got the strut towers, it's because I have to have them, so that's a question I get asked a lot. So the next job is just to basically tuck this metal in to meet this metal here. So I've got full clearance around that. So yeah, just got to bring this one into here and just weld all that together. So I've just trimmed all that and cut around the bottom a bit further to make the opening wider, and hammered the metal sort of to fill the gap. So you can see that's all closed up that gap now, and I've got a pretty nice wide opening. So I'm going to have to weld along that seam and then up here and probably down there. So welded all that, just smoothed it all out. So this is the method I've come up with for putting the shock in the exact same position on the other side. So this 30mm box section fits perfectly between the tabs, and I have another piece here which is exactly 90 degrees, and I've trimmed it down so it sits flush with this face, and I've also marked the point, the front point where it intersects the box section, and then I've got the box section hard up against the firewall here. And then when I did the holes, I marked dead center and then used a transfer punch to get the hole in the exact same spot. So what's going to happen now is I've marked the top on both, and I'm going to flip so it goes over on this side upside down. So these tabs are identical because I made those at the same time I was making the ones on the other side. So yeah, flip that over so it'll locate in the same spot here, and then that should give me the exact angle and distance I need to get the shock identical on both sides. I've just spent a fair bit of time getting this jig in the exact position it should be, so I've done that 90-degree angle. I've got this lined up with the mark I put on this side, and then I've also gone ahead, I've got it butted up against the wall, and I've done a couple of check measurements just to make sure, like the distance from the tab to the edge, things like that. So I was pretty confident that this is in the exact position it needs to be, so it's the same as the other side. And then I just went ahead and put a couple of tacks on, so that's locked in now. And I'm going to remove this and put the shock in place just to make sure everything looks okay and there's no clearance issues, and then I'll go ahead and, if that's all good, I'll fully weld these shock mounts. Well, I've skipped ahead a fair bit. I did want to get a bit of video after I welded, but I forgot. So all you've missed out on is I've basically finished welding the two tabs, the shock mounts in place, and then I've gone and put a bit of primer on so it doesn't go all rusty, and I've gone ahead and done the same. I've left this bit bare because I've got to still weld to that, but I've just put some primer on all the bits I've done today, so that's all looking pretty good. And I've checked that the shock is in the exact same position as this side, and everything's looking really good. Just a quick look with the shocks mounted. So I've just spent so many hours getting this into the final position. It's really critical that it's exactly the same as the other side. So just what I've done is I've got a spacer in here which is keeping this bell crank relative to the shock exactly the same as the other side. And then of course it's the shock's bolted in, and then I'm using, so I've got the steel plate which I made two of when I was making the first side, and that's got the actual spaces in there, same as you're going to see on this side. You've got a spacer in there and it's all bolted in. Obviously this one's got the top mount and this one doesn't, so I'm getting the first one into position, and then once that's locked in, then I can start working on the top mount. But yeah, I've just finished tacking it, so it's taken me so long to get this in the perfect spot, but you know, it has to be in the right spot, so it takes as long as it takes, I guess. Lower mount is fully welded on, so I'm just gonna hit it with a bit of primer now. There's not much else to do with that. So just put the shock back in and everything is looking really good. Pretty similar to the other side. Well, it's the same as the other side actually. So now I've got to do the top mount, which is a pretty tricky one. It actually attaches to this tube here. So there'll be a notched tube coming down, and then it picks up the top of this bolt, so the bell crank is in double shear. Show you that on the other side. So it's got this, it's quite a complicated design, but it works. That bolt fits in there perfectly. So I've just taken a rubbing of the size of the hole so I can copy that across to the other side. So I'm just opening up this hole now. I'm just going to put that on top so I can get it exactly the same as the other side. So you can see the bolt, it's going to slip through like that, but we've got to make it a bit bigger to get the head so it slides in. Just like that one. So I just traced this paper template onto the piece, and I've just used this little burr grinder to shape that. Don't really like using these because they give off these little needles that stick into your skin and they just get absolutely everywhere. Really hard to remove, but sometimes it's the only tool. And now the bolt slides perfectly in, so ready to move on to the next stage now. So I've just bolted that on. I've got the spacer either side of the bell crank in there. So that's sitting there like that. Now you're probably wondering why I haven't done this with the notch all in one go. It's actually so difficult to do that, just because, you know, there's so many different ways this can be aligned, but the most important thing is that this is all square. So the way this bolts down onto the bell crank has to be perfectly square, is the most critical part. So doing it this way, I can do up the bolt, get that perfect, and then I can, so I've got the notch tube here, which I did 2 of when I made the other side. So that goes this way. So now it's just a matter of cutting this down to the exact right length that it's going to slip in there perfectly, and then I'm going to bevel and weld all the way around that, and then weld the fish mouth onto this tube. So that's just kind of an easier way of doing it, by making it a 2-piece. I mean, to get this notch exactly right and get that face perfect would be so difficult. So that's how I've done it. So just cut that down. I didn't want to make it too short because I can always take more off, but I can't add it back, if you know what I mean. So probably a couple more millimeters, and then that should slip in between. So I'm just gonna take it over here and just sneak up on it using this linisher. So I've just finished trimming this down now. It's a pretty good fit. Not the easiest to put in one-handed, but slips in pretty nicely, and so we got a perfect gap around the fish mouth. And of course I'm going to bevel this edge and weld that on the bench, so we'll have a nice strong weld there and a really nice weld here. So that's just an easier way of making a really complicated part fit into a tight spot. So I just cleaned up all the metal, so it's all bright, clean metal for TIG welding. Removed some of this primer cold gal that I use to stop rust, and so it's all good to weld. So I've just tacked 3 tacks around the perimeter of this, and I've got all the shock mounts, bell crank mount clamped down hard, so everything's in the exact position it needs to be in. So now that it's tacked in place, I'm gonna pull this out and weld all the way around on the bench, and then put it back in and then do this weld here. Alright, so I took that out and welded it on the bench, made sure I had really good penetration on the inside, and then I just smoothed out the welds so it's got that one-piece look about it. So pretty much ready to weld that now. So I'll just put a couple of tacks. I've got that bell crank bolted in nice and tight, so everything's in the perfect position. So I'll put a couple of tack welds, probably 4 tack welds all the way around it, and then I'll remove the bell crank and the shock and get all that out of the way, because it's going to get pretty hot once I've got it locked in. So as you can see, that's all fully welded now, and put some primer on it. So that's all finished. Now I'm moving on to the lower control arm pushrod mount. I've bolted the shock back in now. So that's all pretty much done, and now I'm doing the push rod. So the push rod, so I actually made the tabs again when I was doing the other side. I made these 2 tabs, so they're just ready to be tacked into place. I've just got to line those up the same as the other side. I'm just going to tack them for now. I'm probably going to be doing some modifications to these lower control arms, so just going to tack it for now. I no need to fully weld it, and then that's pretty much all I really need to do for the front suspension. But I'll get that done and then show you what that looks like. I just tacked those tabs on now, so that's finished, and I'm just making up another push rod. So I don't actually have 2 at the moment, so I've just measured the existing one and cut a piece of tube to the same length, and then I've got some of these threaded bungs. So we've got a left-hand thread and a right-hand thread, so you can increase or decrease the length of the push rod just by twisting it. Same with the rod ends, they've got a left hand and a right hand thread. So I'm just going to put these in now, a couple of tacks on those, just tacks for now because I'm not 100% sure this is the correct length push rod. If anything, it's a bit longer than I want, so I might need to slightly shorten these. So just going to tack it and test everything out and see what sort of ride height I've got, and then yeah, if they're good, I'll fully weld them, otherwise they'll need shortening. Alright, so I just got everything assembled, all finished. I'm about to put the wheels back on, but I thought I would just give you a quick look at how it's looking now with both sides of the suspension complete. It's come out really good, pretty happy with that. Yep, so I'll get the wheels back on and give you a look at that, and then that's pretty much it for this video. That's it guys, it's all finished. Wheels are on, it looks amazing. So stoked with how good that came out. Obviously these are just 3D printed for now. There will be some minor tweaks once I know the corner weights to the hole positions, and that's the reason they're not actually CNC'd out of aluminium yet. But once I know how heavy the car is going to be, that can all be done pretty easily. It's just a matter of finishing the rest of the car, I guess. So that's pretty much it for the fabrication diary of the passenger side front pushrod suspension. Thanks for watching, I hope it was interesting. Let me know if you enjoy this kind of video and I'll continue to make more. Cheers.